Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and the fact that the bull market support band has now blasted above $20,000. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let's go for 100,000 subscribers. Give the video a thumbs up. Also, check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, the bull market support band, we know it's made up of the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA. And the reason we follow it is primarily because last cycle it was our support anytime we had a correction, for the most part. Now, there were some corrections that did not go down to the 20-week moving average. Sometimes we would come down and rebound for a few weeks and then go down to it. But we typically would rebound at the 20-week moving average in the event of a correction. So we don't know when a correction to the 20-week moving average would occur. We know that at some point it will happen. If you go back and look at the time between tests of the 20-week moving average, it ranged from 77 days. Here is 84 days. This one took about 63 days or so. This one was a longer one at 105 days approximately. And they had very different ranges for each specific test. And this cycle, we can say, well, we've tested it at least once. You could say that this is at least one test potentially. Maybe this is the second test right here. 84 days, 42 days. And now, since the last time we tested it, it's been approximately 112 days, which is about the same amount of time as this one. We also had a similar one here, where it was about 112 days, 105 days or so before testing it. So we've seen these types of moves before. Now, one thing we have to realize, and let's just go ahead and say what it is. So the 20-week SMA is 20,554. The 21-week EMA is 22,918. So we do not know exactly when we'll test it. It could be next week. It could be next month. It could be 2 months from now. We really do not know when it will be tested. But the point is to maintain the integrity of the bull market, we want to hold it as support. This is what we did last cycle. We've seen what happens when we fail to hold it as support. We failed here, and we had a dump, a further dump. We failed here, and we had a catastrophic dump. If we fail, things can go they can go south fairly quickly. They don't rebound as quickly. One of the things we said is when we were back over here, and we've been saying it all along, is if we hold this as support, then sentiment can change on a dime, right? It can change on a dime, and little did we know it was about to blast off 300%. Bitcoin went up 4x over the next 3 months or so. Now, the question now is, well, now that we're up here and we haven't had a correction in a few months, we see that the price of Bitcoin has started coming down, and it could indicate a new shift where we come down for a few weeks and ultimately test this. Again, we don't know, and by the time we do test it, these moving averages would likely be a lot higher unless it's tested this week. If it's tested this week, then these would be the ranges that we'll have. If it's next week, then they'll continue to go up. Okay, so that's generally the idea. You can already see that they're starting to curve over some because the price of Bitcoin has not continued on this amazing rally, and instead it's come back down. So these are going to start to curve over some, and if it does end up coming down, you'll probably see the 20-week SMA go above the 21-week EMA, just like we saw right here. Okay, so the first thing we need to note is that if we fall down to it, that would be the level we would want to hold to maintain the integrity of the bull market. But what if we don't hold it? Right? We always talk about holding it, and believe me, I want to hold it. I feel like there's a decent chance whenever we do test it that the bulls will hold it as support. But if we go into everything with the idea that there's only one possible outcome, then it obviously makes it so that you're not considering the other risks involved, because there's always more than one outcome. There's always more than one outcome. So to get somewhat of a better idea of another possibility that could happen is, and by the way, we don't care about wicks. Right? We don't care about wicks. We could come down to it, have a wick below it, and then ultimately close above it and be fine, and history would remember that test as holding the bull market support band. But let's look at another cycle. Because we've compared, we've spent a few months now comparing this cycle to this one. We talk about it a lot in the Beauty of Mathematics videos where we look at the total cryptocurrency market capitalization, and we talk about a lot of the similarities between this cycle and the one we're currently in. If this is, say, a double peak cycle like this one, you can see that this cycle, we did not hold the 20-week SMA. In fact, we went below it for a few weeks. We were more or less below it for a month before getting back into it and then trending up. But make no mistake, it was a somewhat scary time to go below and to not really know, okay, well, are we about to head down much lower or what's going on? And ultimately, we can see that, yeah, I mean, we went below it, but we ultimately were able to recover. So we don't want to discount this possibility. Okay, we don't want to discount this possibility because there are some similarities between this cycle and that one. One of the similarities we talked about is, this cycle we came down into the band a little bit here. We came back out. We came back into it. We were flirting back out with it, back in. Similar stuff over here, right? Into the band, out of the band. And then we did come back in. And then we flirted with it a couple times back out, right? We slightly went out of it there. Anyways, we came down here, a final capitulation. We've moved back up, and the idea is, well, what if it is a double peak cycle where we get something like this? This is something we've talked about for the last 2 or 3 months. Now, if this is the case, and we have a sustained correction that lasts for 2 or 3 months or something, it's possible we break it. And then we ultimately trend up later. One of the things we've also discussed is that this one, the amount of time that we've spent in the accumulation phase for this cycle was obviously a lot longer than this one. So it's a slightly delayed version of this cycle. So this cycle more so resembles this cycle than the one we had last cycle, at least so far. Obviously, last cycle did not have any of these, major moves like this out of the regression band and then going back down into it, right? It was just a clean accumulation phase followed by a pretty systematic move to the peak with corrections along the way that took us to the 20-week moving average. This cycle has been anything but that. We went above the band, we broke below the 20-week. We went slightly above the band, we broke below the 20-week. We're back above the band again. Are we going to hold the 20-week? We don't know yet. Another thing to consider, again, we want to consider all possibilities so that you understand the risks involved. Another possibility is, well, what if it's a triple peak cycle? I mean, to some degree, why do we ignore this peak? Well, this was a substantial move. If you look at its extension from the fair value, it was about a 200% extension. This one here was around a 250% extension. So we might as well, to some degree, consider this to be maybe a first peak of the cycle, and maybe this is a second peak. And what if you notice this was at 14K, this one was at 42K, so this is a times 3. Maybe the next one will be times 3. That'll take us to 126 from 42K. So these are just some possibilities we want to consider. And while it seems nice and all that we would just hold the support band every step of the way, we have to consider the possibility that it doesn't happen. One idea is, and we've talked about this a few times, is what if we're doing something like this, where we're increasing systematically over a long period of time, but we visit, we occasionally visit the top of it, we occasionally visit the bottom, we occasionally visit the top. It's possible we come back down and then ultimately trend back up and put in our final peak for the cycle later on. We don't want to discount this possibility either. So sometimes it's good to just take a step back and see where we are. Now remember, Bitcoin at the end of the day will, it has a way of doing what a lot of people do not necessarily anticipate. And one potential path from here is to just trend back up and maybe go to the top of the regression band. And right now that ranges from 56,292 up to 82,955. So this is the range where we would say, okay, well, this could be the peak. Now remember, the top band is only fit to 3 data points, so there's a lot more uncertainty than there is with this band down here, which was instrumental in helping us to identify our accumulation phase for this market cycle. So what we want to do is we want to go into this with the idea that if we dump in over the next few weeks this would be the major line of defense where the bulls would come out to hold the line and say, you know what, let's try to maintain the integrity of the bull market and let's keep this thing going. Okay, that would be the spot. And you might say, well, why would that be the spot? Why not 30K? Yes, 30K is also a line of defense. I'm sure 25K is as well, or at least, theoretically it is. These are nice round numbers that people will probably have buy orders at in the event of a capitulation wick. But at the end of the day, as crazy as it seems, Bitcoin could dump all the way back down here. And if it holds, then just by looking at the last cycle, the integrity of the bull market is maintained and sentiment can change on a dime again and it can continue going back up. Imagine it does something like this where the 20 week is doing some, it's trending up like that. If you come back down, test it as support, and then ultimately continue on our journey. This is certainly a possibility, and we don't, this is the main thing we want to consider so that in the event of a dump, we know where the bull market support band is. So again, it ranges from 20,555 or so up to 22,919. Obviously, you can see the numbers are fluctuating a little bit up there, but more or less it ranges from 20.5K up to around $23,000. So hopefully this video has been informative. Remember, we need to consider all possibilities so that you understand the risks involved. There's certainly a lot more risk up here than there was down here when we were calling it, a key accumulation phase, where it's like, for me, it was like, I don't really care what happens. It's just, a systematic DCA buy of Bitcoin. But when you get up into these regions, it becomes a lot more testy or a lot more risky as to whether it's a good play or not, because you don't want to be that guy that comes in at the local top that we can't get back above it for an extended period of time. Obviously, at least most people wouldn't want to be in that situation. You could say that, well, the people that bought back over here are doing well now, but there's also the time value of your money, and you don't just want to sit on your money, on an asset and wait for a long time just for it to get back to its just where you're breaking even, and that doesn't even include inflation. So let's consider all possibilities. We're trying to maintain an open mind, and if we do come back down and test it over the next month or two, we'll know where we need to hold the line to maintain the integrity of the bull market. If it doesn't hold, altcoins stand to lose a lot. Historically speaking, if it doesn't hold, altcoins are in for a reckoning, to say the least. But again, it's the risks we take, and the people that took the risk last time are certainly, it certainly has paid off so far. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe. Give the video a thumbs up. We're going for 100,000 subscribers. Also, remember there's the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. We also have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com. You'll get access to weekly reports, weekly videos, the Telegram alerts channel, the risk dashboard, premium list live streams, a whole lot of stuff. Make sure you guys check it out. There's also a lifetime deal going on for one more week before the price of that goes up. Make sure you guys check that out as well in the description below. That'll wrap it up. Subscribe. We'll see where we are next week with the 20-week moving average, and I'll see you next time. Bye.